So what is happening from the monistic perspective? So monastic Vedanta, or Advaita Vedanta as it's called, also considers ignorance as an important concept. And ignorance also has got some synonyms: Maya, Avidya, and Upadhi. And last week, we had a very brief discussion of the ontological status of what is this avidya or ignorance. From a Dvaita perspective, it is a Sat, it is a real entity. Whereas from an Advaita perspective, so they have formulated this third category of reality called Sadasad Vilakshanatva. So that this avidya is actually called something which is neither real nor non-real, but it is unreal or mithya. Okay, so we discussed that at that point of time, saying that avidya is not actually a tangible entity. It is not something that you can actually say this is real, that it actually has got a time-space relationship, but it is something that is very nebulous. And it is from the, I'm just taking an Advaitin's shoe here and explaining what it means. And it is anirvachyatvam. This is something that I cannot explain, but it is neither real nor it is an illusion. It is this third category which I cannot actually explain what it is. So that is what is called Sadasad Vilakshanatvam, which is a postulate of the Advaita school. So I put a very important problem here of philosophy that folks discuss, and that is how it has been over the last several hundreds, if not thousands of years, from the time of Badarayana or Veda Vyasa, of trying to understand reality and illusion. How do you know this? So from an Advaita perspective, they have a formula for what is unreal or mithya. So they have got this definition called Vimatam Mithya Drishyatvat. Okay, so that is the view there is whatever I perceive and see is mithya. That is their fundamental axiom. Okay, so whatever I perceive in this world is mithya stroke an illusion, because it is an object of perception, like the snake which is perceived on the rope, or a silver that is perceived on a conch shell. So one of the questions that can come here, and I want you to be thinking about this problem, is can the existence of occasional illusions like a rope, like a snake on a rope, or a silver on a conch shell, be a justification for the generalization of the illusoriness of the universe at large? Yeah, there are some exceptions, but exceptions never become the rule. That is a very simplistic view of looking at this problem, but we will try and explore this further. So now that you understood what is that avidya from an Advaitin's point of view, now let us look at how does that affect Brahman. Remember, I told you it's Brahma Ajnanavada. So what happens is that this avidya, which is, as I said, synonymous, it's also called Maya, it is also called Upadhi. So what happens, this is from an Advaitin perspective. I'm just giving you that view. So what happens there is this Maya covers this Nirguna Brahman. And when this Maya covers the Nirguna Brahman, or this ignorance covers the Nirguna Brahman becomes the Saguna Brahman. Who are the Saguna Brahmans? This is all the Vishnus, the Vyuha forms, all the Avatara forms, your Krishna, all these types that are celebrated in our Itihasas and Puranas, they are all Saguna Brahman. They actually do not exist. They appear to be existing because of the superimposition of ignorance on Nirguna Brahman. Okay. Now, there is a further superimposition on the Saguna Brahman called this Upadhi. Upadhi is also another name for avidya or Maya. They are all the same ontological categories with different names just to confuse folks who are deeply interested in philosophy. But Upadhi is also avidya. So that Upadhi then supposed to superimpose on Saguna Brahman, and that leads to jivas, that are you and me. So in this view, which is quite interesting, it is an interesting hypothesis. So in this view, Saguna Brahman and the jivas are all mithya. They're actually not there. They are actually Nirguna Brahman. And they appear to be so like the snake on the rope or a silver on a conch shell because of this superimposition of avidya or ignorance on the Nirguna Brahman. Okay, so this is the overall bird's eye view of what the monistic view on this problem of ignorance. Who has ignorance? Okay, now the other thing that needs to be said here is the same ignorance, which is also called avidya, when it is superimposed on the Nirguna Brahman, then becomes the material world or the prakriti. Okay, so that is also mithya. So in this equation, Krishna, Rama are mithya, you and me are mithya, and this material world is mithya, and there is this only this fellow who is called Nirguna Brahman, who apparently is satya. So that is the view of the monistic school. So when you look at this view, Maya, the first event that happens is Maya covers Nirguna Brahman. So it is called Brahma Ajnana Vada. So that is the first event that happens. What are the subsequent events? Other unreal things evolve. Saguna Brahman, Jiva, Prakriti, etc. Okay, so this Jiva then has forgotten that this is Nirguna Brahman, that I am Nirguna Brahman. He has forgotten that. So he is going through the cycles of samsara. Okay, so this is the bird's eye view. So again, the problem here is the view. If you look at this from a very high level view, the problem there is ignorance falls on the Nirguna Brahman. Okay, ignorance is on Brahman. Okay, there is a very famous verse in Mundaka Upanishad called Yes Sarvajnaha Sarvavid Yasya Jnanamayam Tapaha. So this Brahman is celebrated as Sarvajnaha. He is celebrated as omniscient. So the problem of philosophy there is, how can ignorance cover the all-knowing principle? Yeah. So these are all problems of philosophy for which answer is yet to arrive from the monastic schools. But I'm just giving you this interesting twist to this problem, because most folks and friends who like Advaita philosophy, including myself, but from their perspective, they have actually not able to dissect and understand Advaita in its core essence. So that is a problem that many monastic friends have, but that is their problem. They have to answer these questions as to how an omniscient being can have ignorance superimposed on it. Okay. In fact, the monastic school is so, how shall I put it, is so interesting that it even says, for a Nirguna Brahman to become omniscient, it needs to have a superimposition of ignorance. You need to have a superimposition of ignorance for something to become omniscient. I don't know how you can square that circle, but it is their particular view. Okay. So coming back to this, so the problem there is this avidya is there, so we are going through samsara. When we realize that we are the same Nirguna Brahman, then that ignorance is gone, and that is our moksha. But that ignorance itself is not a real entity, that it is a mithya, which actually is non-different from an illusion. Mithya and asat are actually, in the deepest sense, are one and the same. It is just a creation by the monastic schools to have the trifold classification of reality. But for those of you who are interested in this area, you can look it up. There are lots of material out there to actually understand that mithya is actually asat. So in that sense, monastic philosophy is Buddhist philosophy. There is actually no difference. Yeah. So from the realistic school, what the realistic philosophers will say is, only when there is a real disease, you try to eradicate. What need is there to eradicate an imaginary disease? You don't go to a doctor with an imaginary disease so that the doctor can eradicate it. You go to a doctor for eradication only if they have a real disease. So this ignorance on something must be a real entity. Otherwise, there is no point in talking about eradicating something that does not exist. So that is another thought that I want to plant in this session. So now this problem of how this Nirguna Brahman has Avidya on it, and then becomes Saguna Brahman, and then becomes Jiva, and then it goes through samsara is quite a complex concept. And I certainly don't have the intention of covering every aspect and angle of this philosophical problem. But I will just give a few headlines, bullet points for you to think about, because I honestly hope that all of us who have been congregating here every Sunday, who deeply think about these problems, I think they should have access. They should be able to access and understand what is it that our monastic friends are talking about. Harish has raised his hands. Harish.
Yeah, just one question. There's also an argument about asat versus impermanent. Can you elaborate on that point a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely, Harish. So so this is again is a very unique monastic problem, that a definition that what is sat and what is mithya. Okay, so and asat. What is sat from a monastic school? Anything that is forever is sat. Anything that is permanent is sat, and anything that is non-permanent is mithya. Okay, but that is not how the world philosophies, Western philosophies, and also the realistic schools of Indian philosophies would define that. What they would do is something that is there forever is called nitya, whereas something that is not there forever is called anitya. Both nitya and anitya can be satya. Yeah, there is no reason to define anitya as mithya. Yeah, so that is where the crux of the problem is. There is no prescription in the Vedas to actually say any entity that is anitya is actually mithya. Okay, there it is not. And my grandfather is anitya. He was there for 79 years and then he went and he disappeared. He was anitya, but that doesn't mean he was not satya. He was really there. So this is where the problem is. I hope that answers your question. So it is about anitya is equals mithya. So this is a unique concept of monastic philosophy, which other schools don't agree. So they would say anitya can also be satya, nitya is also satya, whereas asat is something that is never there in all three times. In the past, in the present, and in the future, it is not there. That is why it is called sat, asat. Whereas a nitya can be there in the past, or it can appear in the future, or it can be in the present for some time. But when it is there, it has got a space-time correlation, so it is satya. So this is the difference. Anyway, so the bullet points of we are in the Avidya angle of monastic schools. So as I said, we don't have time. We can spend a month talking about this, but I just want to capture some bullet points for you to think about of how can Avidya fall on Nirguna Brahman? Is it possible? So the questions there, if that Avidya falls on Nirguna Brahman, when did that covering of Avidya on Brahman happen? Okay, if Avidya is non-sentient, which it is, how can Avidya have the ability for self-initiated action and cover on Nirguna Brahman? Who made the superimposition happen? Did it just happen just like that out of the blue, or somebody made this superimposition happen? Okay, did the superimposition happen on the whole of Brahman or part of the Brahman? Next question, does this Avidya penetrate the inner core of Brahmanhood, or it is just an external covering or a superimposition? Here is another question. After this Avidya is removed, once I know I am Nirguna Brahman, what guarantee is there it will not happen again? Where is Nirguna Brahman? And where did when did the superimposition happen, and where did this happen? So these are all the questions that come about when you take this view. And I can tell you to this audience with a sense of confidence that no answer has been provided by the monastic school yet. This is their problem. They have not been able to answer these questions. Okay, and to say this Jagat is mithya, this world is mithya, again is an interesting Buddhist concept, but whether it is tangible in this world of experience is a different matter. Okay, so for example, I've just put a provocative statement. World's mithya, unreal. Is it problematic or is it an acceptable hypothesis? So the way I put this is ignorance is part of this world. If we say Jagat is mithya, then ignorance is mithya. So everything in this Jagat is mithya. If that is the case, why did Vedanta Sutra started off with this with the second sutra that gave a definition of Brahman as Janmadhyasya Yataha? He who is the creator of this world is Brahman. We know the famous Taittiriya Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisambhishanti tad vijijñāsasva tad brahmeti. This fellow is called Brahman because he is the creator. And if he is called Brahman because he is a creator, will his creation be false? Something for us to think about. I don't have an answer, but I'm just giving you roots for you to make your own inner journey and understand as to how difficult it is to accept this view that there is this great Brahman, but he's created this universe which is false. Okay, so that is, you're accusing Brahman of cheating us by creating an illusory universe. This is what the problem is from the realistic philosophers who celebrate this Brahman as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes. Jayatirtha, for example, he captures the same point very beautifully. He says, Janmadhyasya yataha iti bhagavata sutrakarena Jagat udayadi nimitta karanatvam parasya brahmano lakshanam abhihitam nacha jagat satyatamantarena tad vastavam sambhavati. So if Vedavyasa says the definition of Brahman is he who is the creator of the universe, then that universe has to be real, is the Jayatirtha's view. When Acharya says Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parashaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. So what does that mean in Dvadasha Stotra? When you look at this multifaceted universe, this amazing universe, this beautiful universe that works so intricately, what do we understand? We understand the greatness or the intelligence behind this that has created this universe. Yeah. So that is the philosophy that we should get when we understand that this universe is real. So that is one of the polemics there, the arguments on both sides as to why accepting this world as mithya is problematic. So coming to the problem at hand. So Brahman is non-material. We accept that. It is self-luminous. So self-luminous is an important concept. It is also called swaprakashatva. Swaprakasha is self-luminous. That means something that knows about itself, something that knows it exists, something that is aware of its own consciousness is swaprakasha. For example, you and me, we are swaprakasha to some extent, in the sense that we know ourselves as conscious beings. Yes, that is called self-luminosity. So here is the problem. If Brahman is non-material, it is self-luminous, how can ignorance penetrate its inner core and lead to Brahman's ignorance of its existence and its non-difference from Jiva, who has still not come into existence? Okay, so you're looking at the very first event from a monistic perspective. Yeah, this Avidhya has to cover, right? So here is the problem. I have another illustrative slide coming up. Ignorance is always external to Brahman. Ignorance, even from a monistic perspective, cannot penetrate Brahman's inner core. This Brahman is akhanda or partless. So there is no way in which Avidya can actually penetrate or cover a part of Brahman, because Brahman is partless. Brahman should always be, so in this problem, this Brahman, this red round blob here, should always know that it is Brahman. There should be no ignorance that it is the Jiva here, because what is the first event? Avidya has covered Brahman. Next problem, Nirguna Brahman has got no attributes or qualities. When you say something is covering, then you have to say something is covering some aspect of something. But for a Nirguna Brahman, what is being covered anyway? No answer. After it is removed, as I said, what guarantee is there it will not happen again? This is a problem. Here is another problem. Where is Nirguna Brahman? Has anybody given that answer from a monistic perspective? Absolutely not. Nobody knows where this Nirguna Brahman is. From a realistic perspective, we know from Purusha Shukta, Pado Asya Vishwabhutani Tripadasya Amrutandivi. Purusha Shukta has said us that fellow is in Vaikuntha in three different aspects, and one aspect of him is here in Mrityu Loka and in the material creation. But can anybody tell us where Nirguna Brahman is? Here is the problem. Because for us to say that something exists somewhere, you need to bring two things into the equation. You need to bring time and you need to bring space into this coordination to say where Nirguna Brahman is. For the time and space coordination to be there, time has to be real, space has to be real. But from a monistic perspective, time and space are not real. They are mithya, they are asat. So if you have that, or if you accept that there has to be real time and real space, then the concept of monism is gone, because in monism there can be only one sat. Time and space cannot be sat. So these are all the problems that monistic philosophers face, and they are yet to provide a rational explanation to that, or I'm yet to listen to anybody who has actually given me a proper rational view of where is Nirguna Brahman. So I hope you find this interesting and provocative, because my intention here is we are students of Vedanta and we should not just accept some dogmas. What we should do is we should do our own research and understand various views and then arrive at a conclusion. Yeah. So where did Avidhya come from is a big question. Where did Avidhya come from? When did it cover Brahman? Did it cover the same again? Questions are coming again. Where did Avidhya come from? There is no answer. Okay. Avidhya is a jada, non-sentient. It cannot have an independent ability of self-initiated action. Veda Vyasa has put a sutra there. Rachana anupapatteshta na anumanam. It cannot do things on its own. If Avidhya is an insentient thing and cannot do things on its own accord, how on earth can it cover this big being called the Nirguna Brahman? How can Avidhya cover Brahman on its own accord? Who made this superimposition happen? How can Avidhya generate a diverse, well-orchestrated universe, as Brahman is not a creator in monistic philosophy? It is just a vivarta. It is just a superimposition. Superimposition is not creation. Yeah. So when there is a rope and you see the snake, snake was not created by the rope. It is just a superimposition of the rope. So in those kind of situations, how can you get this diverse, well-orchestrated universe? Here is a bigger question. The question of Jiva arises only after superimposition of ignorance on Brahman. Okay, so I think the problem here, this formidable problem for monistic philosophers is this view reduces Brahman to a position of helpless submission to its own ignorance. Yeah, so this is that is where it boils down to. And in that situation, the question arises, we should not be worshipping Nirguna Brahman, we should be worshipping Avidhya. We should be worshipping ignorance, because this is so powerful that it can actually cover the Nirguna Brahman and bring all this artificial appearance of the universe. Yeah. So I hope these things, now, as I said, I'm just giving you provocative views of how the Vedantic polemics goes on. And this has gone on for hundreds and thousands of years. Vedavyasa in Avirodha Adhyaya, he actually brings up this philosophy and discusses about this. Check that out. Check about what is Vedavyasa's view on Buddhist philosophy. What is Vedavyasa's view on monistic philosophy? How Vedavyasa equates monistic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. All these things get discussed in the Avirodha Adhyaya, which is a fascinating area of study. So here is my summary slide, which I hope you will like. So all that I've told you about the monistic view boils down to this. Okay, so it is pitch dark. It is Amavasi. There is no moon. It is very, very dark. You are inside the house. There is no electricity in the house. There is no light. You are sitting in a dark room. There is no light. It is night. You are sitting in a very, very dark room. You have taken a blanket and you have covered yourself. You have closed your eyelids. Okay? These are all the things that have happened. It is dark, no electricity. You are sitting in a dark room. You've covered yourself with a blanket and you have closed your eyes. Everything here is external, and this is the Brahman. Will I not know I don't exist? For me, when I sit in a dark room, covered with my blanket and my eyes closed, I certainly know I exist because I have self-luminosity of some extent. So if Brahman is Swaprakasha, no amount of external covering can conceal the essential inner nature of Brahman. Okay, these are all basic stuff. Yeah, it feels like hardcore philosophy, but this is basic kindergarten stuff. How can me covering myself in the blanket make me forget who I am? This is exactly his monastic philosophy in the nutshell. So think about this problem. So this avidya is insentient, it's unreal. How can an insentient penetrate the inner core of Brahman and make it forget that it is Brahman? If you take this view where the blanket, the eyelid closing, the blanket, the no electricity in the room, and it is pitch dark, all this is equivalent to avidya or ignorance. So this is a big problem that monastic philosophers face, but they have not been able to answer.
HinduKnowledgeAcademy.com will celebrate Vedic culture and present its philosophies to the modern Hindu in an accessible format. Our ancient heritage is our greatest strength. Through preservation and dissemination, together let us spread positivity in the world. Thank you for listening and welcome to Hindu Knowledge Academy.